Hello, we'll be starting the presentation in just about 2 minutes. Starting the presentation in just about 2 minutes. Thank you for your patience. We'll be starting the presentation in just about 1 minute. 1 more minute to the start of the presentation. Hello, and welcome to the Making Predictive Analytics Practical webcast, all about how marketing can drive better engagement. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today, wherever you are. We've got a large audience today of people attending, people ranging from folks here in the U.S. to all over the world. So we thank you for spending your time with us today. So before we start the presentation and get to our featured speaker, let's give you a little background on how the day is going to run. And we'll just move forward to our speakers. Today we are fortunate enough to have Mr. Rowan Curran. Rowan is an analyst from Forrester Research. Rowan is focused on the predictive analytics work that he's been doing lately, and also works on things like the Forrester Wave, which I'm sure many of the folks listening on the call are very familiar with. He's got a great amount of experience, talks to a lot of people, and has done a lot of thinking on this topic, and I think you'd be very excited to hear what he has to say. My name is Robert Mattson. I'm the Director of Product Marketing for Sisyphean, which is a product from the company Telerik, a progress company. So I will be doing taking the back seat today while Rowan does most of the talking, but you'll be hearing my voice here and again. So let's jump to a little housekeeping before we start. All your lines are muted. If you do have questions, you can put them in the question window or in the chat window, send them directly to Rowan or myself, but the question window should work just fine for you. We will address as many of those questions as we can at the end of the presentation as time allows. And if you are looking to share this information that you're seeing today with the folks that are around the office, you can do that. We will give you a link so you can get to the replay and you'll be able to hear exactly what went on if you want to refresh your memory or share it with somebody else. So with that said, I'd like to hand the baton over to Mr. Rowan Curran. Rowan Curran, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much, Robert.
Hello, everyone.
Great. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. As Robert said, my name is Rowan Curran. I'm a researcher at Forrester. And what I'd like to talk to everyone about today is a topic that I find tremendously exciting, and that is how we can use predictive analytics to help us prosper, specifically in digital experiences. And I want to start off by putting this in a little bit of context, because we're actually going to be talking about context quite a bit throughout this presentation. So we've identified this trend at Forrester that we call the mobile mind shift. And this is the idea that customers more and more are expecting to get the content that they want in their immediate context right at the moment that they need it. And while this trend is being led by the adoption of mobile devices and mobile handsets, it's actually a mindset that's bleeding across all the different channels that we interact with our customers over. And it's really helping to shape their expectations. And it's not just the expectation of our customers today, it's our customers of tomorrow and in 10 years. So we really need to identify how we can serve these mobile moments, and predictive analytics is a great way to add that context and serve that right content. And we need to create personalized experiences to deliver these contextual moments. So to give you a very quick example of what I mean when I'm talking about how to use predictive analytics to create contextual moments to engage your customers, I'm going to use an example of a UK telco that's been doing this pretty successfully for a couple years. They combine their customer records with geospatial analysis and a few other things to identify some high-value customers. These are customers that are these are customers that have the potential to buy an international data plan, which this telco makes a lot of money off of. But they identified that folks were much more likely to get the data plan if they were offered, if they were given the offer before they actually crossed the international border. So they figured that they should probably target those customers while they were in transit before they crossed the border. And in order to do this, they actually used predictive analytics. So they were able to identify customers as they were moving on trains using the data from their cell phone GPS and their customer records, as well as train schedules to predict what train they were on and what direction they were going on, so that they could immediately serve that offer for the international data plan before they crossed the tunnel. And they were actually able to increase their uptake on this offer by double-digit percentage, which was quite a lot of dollars for them. To take this to a more familiar place where I'm sure some of us have experience, take the idea of Google Now. This is a great example of how you can use contextual data and predictive analytics to give in-the-moment context to your customers. So, for example, my Google Now, and sorry, if you were not familiar with Google Now, this is basically a personal assistant that uses your own personal corpus of data to give you guidance throughout the day. So for me, Google Now took my email, took my travel throughout the day, and predicted that tonight I'm going to need directions on how to go to my dodgeball game, which is right up the street from where I work. I never told it that I played dodgeball. I never gave it any kind of explicit information about that. It had just identified by several different factors, combined with a predictive algorithm, that I would probably need to know how to get there. And it was successful in doing so. So taking this back to the idea of the mobile mind shift driving all this, as we have more and more demands from our customers and they are getting less and less patient with us, we have a big challenge around how to actually address them in their moments of context. So it's not just how do I address them on their handset or how do I address them on their tablet or their laptop. It's how do I address them across all these channels and make predictions about what the best content is for them at the right time. And if you don't think that this is a mind shift that is happening amongst folks, our data is showing, and this data is actually a 1.5 years old at this point in time, so it's probably much more. We have seen that more than 1 in 4 customers expect that their smartphone applications will change the experience based on their location and their current context. So that's 1 in 4 just for the smartphone apps, and that was in late 2013 that we took that data. So I'm sure it's much more now, and this shift is definitely continuing. And this is a very difficult challenge for a lot of companies, as I'm sure many of you know. But thankfully, we do have a couple of different trends that are supporting us in these efforts. So we have a lot of investment coming in for the right areas of technology to support these contextual experiences. We have a large amount of investment in web content management, but also in analytics, marketing software, and testing optimization. And these are 3 of the main components that are going to help drive us towards these predictive contextual experiences. And in addition to this, the budgets are not just landing in IT, they're also landing in lines of business, in what we call business technology. And this helps support many of your marketing organizations in actually buying the technologies that they need to execute these contextual experiences. But just because the business budget is growing right now doesn't mean that you should feel licensed to run rampant with your technology buys and just get all the new shiny toys. it's very important as you're looking to incorporate predictive analytics within your digital experience and within your wider enterprise that you don't move to a shadow IT setup. And I'll talk a bit later about what an alternative to that might look like.
So Rowan, when people
Yeah.
are looking for these new solutions, are they looking for something out of the box? Are they looking to develop their own, some kind of combination of the two?
It is usually a combination of the two, and it really depends on the organization. So I speak to some folks who have absolutely no interest in actually building and exploring their own data models and their own predictive insights. They would like to outsource it to someone else as a service, and there's a bunch of different companies that do this either as data science as a service or as analytics as a service. But we are seeing more and more folks that are bringing it in-house and seeking to build an analytics organization. Sorry, continue, Robert.
Okay, thank you.
And so we have this trend towards contextualization. We have a lot of money, and thankfully we also are in this wonderful age that we call at Forrester the age of the customer. And the age of the customer is this idea that the customer is the one in control of the demand. The customer is the one making the dictations to the companies about what they want and how they want to get it. And in order to meet these demands of these contextualized customers who are leading our age, we need a lot of data, but thankfully we've got it. But data on its own is not enough. In order to explore the data and gain insights and understanding from it, we need analytics. And we don't just need the predictive analytics that I'm going to be focusing on for the rest of this webinar. We also need descriptive and real-time analytics to help us build the entire picture. But those two will only take you so far. So let's talk about predicting the future for contextual experiences. So as I just said, we need all types of analytics. Now, descriptive analytics, they tend to keep you in the past. So these will give you a good idea of what happened, but it won't tell you what might happen in the future or what you should do about it. Predictive analytics helps us reveal what tomorrow might look like so that we can understand what actions and what decisions we need to take today. And this is really where the rubber hits the road. This is the core, this is one of the most important things that you can think of as you're moving towards implementing advanced analytics and predictive analytics. It's all about making the right decisions at the right moment for the right customer, not just having a report that goes to a CIO or a manager about what maybe they should do in the future. It's all about actionable information and decisions that can be taken.
So, Ron, I'm going to ask you to pause on that one. So there's that famous quote, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. So you're not saying that the historical analytics are not needed, are you?
No, I am absolutely not saying that. As I mentioned before, we need all types of analytics to really build the best set of insights that we can. So in the example that I was speaking about at the very beginning, the telecom from the UK, they used descriptive analytics to identify that their customers were more likely to buy the international data offer if they were sent it before they crossed the channel. But they actually had used the predictive and real-time analytics to know which customers were making that movement and then to serve that offer in real time to the right customer. So they actually combined all three of those that I was just talking about in order to create their contextual experience.
All right, so there's another phrase that is being bandied about quite a bit. There's predictive, but there's also prescriptive analytics. Could you define what the difference is?
Yeah, so prescriptive analytics actually is kind of twofold. So on the one hand, you have basically what amounts to what folks are really familiar with as business rules. So basically, you have a prediction and you have a business rule that says if the prediction is saying that the customer will buy, do this. If the prediction is saying the customer will not buy, do that. So you have that very simple if this then that business rule setup. But then also, more and more we're seeing prescriptive analytics that are actual analytics on decisions. So it's not just saying if this then that, it's actually giving you probability and recommended actions to take based on those predictions. However, prescriptive analytics is still one of the least mature areas of advanced analytics, and most organizations today we see are still struggling to get to the predictive and real-time level. And I expect to see many more folks in the prescriptive area in the next 5 to 10 years, but predictive and real-time is where most folks are concentrated today. But so what we're talking about prescriptive or predictive, let's take a step back real quick and define for everyone what we're talking about here. So at its very core, a predictive analytic is a simple function if you strip all the complexity away. It's simply a set of input variables that you run an algorithm on, and then it produces a predictive outcome on the other side. So for example, when we're building our contextual experiences for a customer, we would want to take the finances, relationships, and their customer history, put it into that function, and predict an outcome about what their characteristics, likely behaviors, likes, and needs might be. And this is what we've been able to do for quite a while. You can do this with your standard websites through clickstreams and some analytics we've had for quite a while. But today, we also have all of this data about customer context. So what time it is for them, what channel they're on, what their location is and what the weather is, and then even whether they're moving or not, either through a building or on a train or just on foot. And combining this contextual data with the customer data, we're able to use this in-the-moment context to predict the next best action to take. But really, ideally, it's not the next best action. We want to produce the best next action, so that ideal next action to take for them to keep them in our life cycle. And there are a couple of different ways to create predictive models. And this is somewhat similar to the idea of prescriptive analytics. So traditionally, we've had humans and their expertise serve as our predictive analytics. You have marketing and advertising and sales folks who have a lot of experience, a lot of information up in their heads, and they're able to create rules and programs that will predict behavior based on their expertise. And this has worked okay for the past, 40 or 50 years. But today, we can actually augment this and go beyond this with predictive analytics tools. So thanks to Moore's Law and the continuing cheapening of processing power and storage, as well as many more algorithms coming out of academia, we can actually use advanced analytics tools to enhance that human knowledge and produce better predictions. And there are a ton of different predictive models that we can create. Predictive analytics is not just one set of targets or one particular group of maths. So for example, we have, and this is just a short list right here, there are actually hundreds and thousands of predictive algorithms that you can use to create models. So we have things like classifiers that can target specific events or characteristics, so whether a customer is likely to be interested in renting Planet of the Apes or not. Recommenders, so that's for producing a set of recommendations, say through e-commerce platforms that we're probably pretty familiar with thus far. You have clustering, so this is the modern version of the tried and true segmentation, but this is based on advanced algorithms and processing rather than just a few lookalike characteristics. And then we also have numerical and time series forecasting that can be very useful for tracking customers over geographies and other use cases like that. But so what is the actual value that you can get out of predictive analytics? I mentioned in my first example that the telco had double-digit improvements, but let's take some specific numbers here, but this is still a hypothetical example. So let's say we are doing a direct marketing campaign without predictive analytics. We're going to get a 1% response rate for 10,000 customers, 2,200,000 in gross revenue. But then if we do that same campaign using a predictive analytic to identify the buyers most likely to purchase, we can do two things that'll really add value to our company. We can decrease the number of folks that we reach out to initially, so lowering our overall investment cost, but then increase the response rate on the remaining customers. So we are able to both shrink that bottom line and increase that top line for the amount of customers we reached out to, and end up with more profits and more savings in the end, and ultimately better customer engagement because you did not send the unwanted offer to 750,000 folks that were rejecting it. But unfortunately, most folks, you might be in this situation, are not at this situation, are not there today. They're here. They are in a sea of data, and they're drowning in it, and yet they're in a bit of a Sisyphean situation where they're starving for insight. And we see this across organizations where there's tons and tons of data coming in. It's being processed and stored, but there's just a trickle of insights coming out the other side, which is really limiting the business value that can be spread across the company. And it's not just the particular parts of the company that the trickle is flowing. We're actually limiting ourselves, or we have limited ourselves, to particular areas of the customer journey. So the discover, explore, and buy phase of most customer journeys has a lot of analytics around us today, and many companies are focused on this. Fewer folks are focused on using, asking, and engaging with their customers after the buy happens. For our exceptions, there are some wonderful folks who are using advanced and predictive analytics in their customer service, and that's actually one of the most valuable and interesting use cases that we see today. But most folks are still stuck over here on the right. So one way at Forrester that we've worked out with our clients and with our own research to kind of reframe this for how to rethink about your analytics and your data strategy is the idea of a system of insight. Now, this is combining systems of engagement, so how you reach out and touch people through your customer touch points and through the glass, with systems of automation, so all of their data about their context coming from their mobile phones, their GPS location, with your systems of record and the processes in your databases, all those things that go along with it. So here you might be saying, okay, this is all of our enterprise data that we've had for a while, and then our digital experience there at the top. How is this different? Well, the idea here is that instead of having completely separate analytics processes that serve each of these needs, you have common technologies and processes that will bring these all together and serve insights across the company and serve insights across touch points. So if we break this out for digital experiences, it looks a bit like this when we start to open the spigot. We have analytics and insights that will spread across the entire journey. Then we have our touch points. And predictive analytics can help in a number of different ways when you use it at that final touch point. Did the models from your ad serving application or customer journey mapping actually recommend the right push notification or text message? Did you identify the correct moment to engage with your customer in? Were they able to look at their phone, or were they able to access their laptop, or was it just noise in the background because they were doing something else? Then you want to get to predicting how you should contextually deliver to the glass. So standalone or predictive models can embed directly into these platforms, so like WCM or marketing platforms, and then you can actually serve them into those touch points at the top. And then if we step back again to our marketing, commerce, and service platforms, we can leverage predictive models here to know which content we should be pushing towards the top, which campaigns we should be running, which inventory items we should be surfacing to the top of our search results, and predicting what the best outcomes for our customers will be at the same time that we can predict the most revenue and value and profits for our own folks. And these are all supported by customer data, by our content, and by our third-party and outside services. And these are not all packaged solutions. There's a lot of custom coding and extensions that need to go into these to hook these all up together. Because as we'll see later, it's actually an ecosystem of components that is going to come together to create these modern digital experience platforms. And if you're saying to yourself, okay, so digital experience is great, I've got some descriptive analytics, and maybe we're able to do some predictive rules-based contextual serving in real time, but I don't need that predictive side. Well, I would say to you that this is actually the perfect time to get interested in predictive analytics, because you can fight and win the battle for the future of your customers. Sorry, go ahead, Robert.
No, I was just kind of curious if you had any great examples of how some people have achieved this, or how close did they get, and what results did they find?
Yeah, so one of my other favorite examples of folks who have been successful at this is actually another telecom company that's based in Eastern Europe. And they're using a standalone predictive analytics platform from an enterprise software vendor to create their models. They're using a real-time streaming engine to take in all of their customer events from their mobile devices, from their laptops, and from their customer service engagements, feed that through the models, and then serve it back through their web content management system to produce the best offer for their customers. So, for example, one of the things that they do is produce in-the-moment contextual offers for things like flash sales. So say you're a worker in an Eastern European city and it's your lunch break. You leave the office, you pull out your mobile phone, and you are getting directions to the restaurant that you said you would meet your colleagues at. Well, if you've opted into this telco services, you might get an offer for a local retail store that they have predicted that you might be interested in the fashion of. So that would be based on both your customer data from the retail store, your customer data from the telco, as well as the predictive models applied to it. And the predictive models are also taking in that time of day context, how close you are to the location, and a few other factors to serve you the right offer in the right moment and actually engage you with that service. And the great thing about this company is that not only will it serve you that offer in real time, but if you reject that offer, if you say, actually, this is not something that I'm interested in, that feeds back into their predictive model and then will inform the next iteration. So when it creates an offer for the next person, if that next person looks like you, they might not serve that offer because it might not be appropriate at that time. And that's something I'll touch on a bit later. This idea of iterating the predictive analytics is very, very important as we move along. And as I mentioned, this is a battle that you want to get into today because there's a lot of opportunity. It's raging quite hard, and there's a lot of potential. So from our data, we've found that today, more than 45% of technology decision makers are in the process of have implemented a predictive analytics program. And that's less than half, so that's a lot of space there. But there is quite a bit of urgency here because there's another 40% who are interested or are about to implement predictive analytics programs over the next 18 months. And this doesn't mean specifically in digital experiences, but there is a huge drive for using predictive analytics in many, many companies and across the entire enterprise. And this is actually a great way to take advantage of that, the wider uplift of predictive analytics. We see many companies who start to adopt predictive analytics, say, in their manufacturing or in their logistics organization or some kind of back office situation. And then folks in the marketing group or in the sales group or in the web content group see the results they have there, and they bring the predictive solution or platform or service into their group and start reaping the benefits as well. So it's very much a land and expand movement throughout companies, whether or not that's based on one company or more. But it's also really important as we're thinking about predictive analytics, not just to picture the great insights that we might get in these beautiful pieces of data, these golden nuggets. We need to think about how they can drive actions. Because if we're just creating predictive analytics and building models, these are just baubles. They're just shiny objects that look really pretty and might impress a manager or two. But really, if you want to take the most advantage, neither data nor insights are sufficient to drive these great experiences. We really need to move towards that idea of prescriptive analytics, either on the rules side, where many folks are today, or on the true prescriptive analytics, where you're actually running math on the decisions that you're making. So I don't want folks to feel too intimidated by the idea of prescriptive because we're focused on predictive today. But as you're thinking about building programs that implement predictive analytics to reveal insights across your company, be sure that you're also focused on how you can actually leverage those into decisions. Because without decisions, we can't actually deliver these digital experiences that we're managing and optimizing. And as I mentioned before, one of the really important things to be doing as you're building a predictive analytics practice is to build in the idea of continuous learning and continuous insight. So it's not enough to simply take an action based on a prediction that you've made using your historical data. You need to get some kind of feedback on that, because otherwise you might as well have flipped a coin. You have no idea whether or not the prediction and the action that you took actually worked unless you have some kind of either instrumented or explicit feedback mechanism from your users. So like a form or a checkbox or something like that to say whether they had a good experience. So very quickly, I'd just like to talk about a few of the ways that you can actually implement predictive insights to make better decisions. And these are the three main buckets that I usually talk to folks about, so this is a good way to frame your own thinking. So you can use predictive analytics to augment human expertise and intelligence. So this is along the lines of the sort of traditional idea of business intelligence. You can leverage predictive insights through things like dashboarding or providing context around specific predictions to managers to enhance their own decision making. So one of the places that we see this implemented for digital experiences is in campaign planning. So people will forecast who's likely to buy something, what campaigns are likely to work, and then use that to inform their own design and construction of the campaign moving forward. It's not a direct action taken in the moment with the customer, but it does inform business value and allows you to take better actions with the next couple steps. So the next way that you can implement predictive insights are through automated experiences and actions. And this is probably the one that we're most familiar with today. This is the idea of actually putting predictive models or scoring engines and hooking them up with your delivery mechanisms so that when someone comes to your website, you get all the information about what browser they're coming from, what their clickstream data is, what their geolocation is. That hits a scoring model, and it serves up the right content based on all of those factors to them, predicting what would be the next best action for them. And then this third piece is really, really interesting and probably one of the most fascinating areas of using predictive analytics today, and that's using it to discover and build new products and services. So very few people are using this effectively today, but the ones who are doing some really interesting things. So for example, there's another UK bank who is using predictive analytics to actually build new digital money instruments. So they use predictive analytics to identify a market segment that was in between their high-end customers and their low-end customers that they had no product for. They had no way to serve that untapped customer basis. But they used several predictive models along with financial data and transaction information and identified loan rates and things like that that would be appealing to this cohort. A bit more interesting than the banking, there is an international food chain that uses predictive analytics in their logistics and their planning and actually with their partners in inventory and actually in their digital signage as well within their stores to make the best offers. But also, they're using predictive analytics to identify what new food products they should develop and sell. So whether they should, say their hot delicatessen, whether they should be serving 5 pounds of prosciutto or 5 pounds of bratwurst and things like that, or whether they should be making a combination of prosciutto and bratwurst to create some kind of prosciutto wurst to serve to their customers. This is one of the really, really fascinating areas you can apply predictive analytics and really get ahead of some other folks because not too many people are doing this today. And to bring this back to our main focus here, which is building better customer experiences, we've got 4 gaps that lie between what our customers are expecting now that they've shifted to this mobile mindset and businesses are capable of delivering. We have a convenience gap, whether the moment of need is addressed within that moment or whether it's addressed later on. Performance gap, are we actually able to build the right experiences that will serve the right content in the moment and actually achieve that convenience gap? Do we have all of the right infrastructure components in place? We have a personalization gap, and this is really where the predictive analytics comes in. How do you actually build an experience that is targeted for that specific person without actually knowing who that person is? And then there's a bit of a trust gap, and this fits into the predictive picture as well because as you may have heard with things like the Target missed offer a couple years ago where there was a young woman who had been predicted to be pregnant by Target's marketing software, but her parents were not aware, she was served offers about baby food and Pampers and things like that. And it created a real trust problem between Target and her family because her parents did not know how that prediction was created and where that information came from. And therefore, it crossed over what we might call the creepiness line. So bridging this valley with predictive analytics requires several of these components here. So these all support for bridging the gap, but the specific areas that predictive can help are in delivering that content in real time and instrumenting it to improve the prediction in the next iteration so that you can serve an even better offer or you can engage even more effectively with your customer in the next moment. Being able to act immediately, so predicting whether you should push that offer to them as a push notification right in this moment now, or whether you should send them perhaps an email if you can't actually reach them in that exact moment of need and you need to reach them in another moment. Then we have the personalization, so building that context-rich next best action. And that trust, keeping things contextual and making sure that folks are aware, or at least not too disturbed by these predictions coming towards them and what their source was. But then there's a few other items that actually fit in predictive. They're not usually thought of as part of predictive analytics. So building a simple and compelling and complete experience. So one of the best things about predictive analytics is if you serve the right content in the right moment, you don't need to have a whole smorgasbord of content in front of a customer. We don't need to go back to those terrible, terrible 90s e-commerce sites that basically looked like someone took a kitchen sink of logos and marketing information and inventory and just threw it up on a web page. We can serve really simple and compelling experiences that allow people to flow through an entire customer journey without being too distracted. And then again, to click back down to the bottom, making sure that this is mindful of their customer journey, so making sure that you send them the right offer to the right channel in the right moment, so again, that email versus SMS distinction, and that it's reliable and privacy respecting. And as we're building predictive analytics into our digital experiences, it's important to remember that this will all be an ecosystem of solutions and of technologies working together. There are a number of different vendors who are trying to build all of these components, and there's an even larger number of vendors who are trying to build some of these components and connect them with predictive capabilities. So for example, we have folks like the major enterprise digital experience platform vendors that have predictive capabilities built into their platform along with web content management, that commerce, campaign management, search, and recommendations. But most folks are going to be getting more of a componentized setup. So you might have your web content management that has some predictive capabilities with commerce and recommendations. Or you might have a commerce site that can do some recommendations and your web content management, but you need to have your own predictive platform to actually build the models to insert into these different pieces of your architecture. And it's important to note that in many of these platforms that try and combine all the pieces, so if we look back at these large platform vendors for digital experiences, is that the predictive capabilities can vary quite widely. So some folks will provide predictions in a very black box and translucent kind of way. You won't be able to actually see what is happening with the algorithm and why the prediction is being produced. And that works to a certain degree, but if you really want to serve the best offer and actually be able to leverage these insights across the company, you need to have more transparency and more understanding. So if we move forward once again, we have some folks who are simply building the commerce and WCM part of a digital experience solution, and then the enterprise itself brings in their own predictive platform to create recommendations, test them, and then push them out to their delivery systems. And there are actually a number of different generalized predictive analytics platforms that are available today, both open source and proprietary, that can insert their insights directly into these delivery mechanisms. And then there's a few other setups for this. WCM that has testing and recommendations, so A/B testing within a WCM is very common, but augmenting it with your own predictive models and predictive platforms can be very helpful. And then lastly, we have predictive analytics becoming even more a part of search, which is a really fascinating aspect of improving digital experiences. Using predictive analytics in search is one of the best ways to keep folks on your page, since search is usually the last stop they take before they exit it. So if you can save that customer and continue their journey with you rather than with their competitor by predicting what they might be searching for, or predicting synonyms and things like that to concepts that they've submitted, you can really save that sale and make sure that you engage with that customer. So we've thrown a lot at you today, but I'm going to just give you a very quick list of what you can do to start your journey with Predictive tomorrow. So the first question you can ask yourself and your business partners to start thinking about where Predictive would fit into your organization is there a particular moment in this customer journey and a single touch point where I could have a piece of information that would help me predict what the customer would do and make their experience better? So if I knew that a customer was likely to leave our app if they had to click 3 more buttons instead of 2 to get to their deposit page or to get to their page, I might be able to create a better experience and keep them in our loop. And then once you've asked yourself that, you can start looking at what data is already available within your organization to understand your customers and behaviors. So as I said before, there's a huge amounts of data in so many enterprises that is going unused today. There is really no need to start scrambling for outside data sources immediately when you're trying to build predictive analytics programs. Second and third party data sources absolutely help and improve the predictions, and we're seeing marketplaces emerge for the sharing and selling of second and third party data between partners. But using your own internal data first, or at least examining if that's possible, is the most efficient, both cost-wise and organizational-wise, to go. And then start thinking about your technology capabilities, whether you already have some analytics professionals at your company or even developers who can be reskilled to build predictive models, or at least to implement predictive models into your applications and into your experiences. So we're seeing a number of different companies who can't afford this unicorn data scientist that lots of folks talk about, that have the math skills, the PhD statistics, they have domain expertise, science skills, business skills, all of these things. There's too few of those folks around to meet the demand for advanced analytics professionals. So we're seeing many folks who are actually turning to their developers and business people and reskilling them to do predictive analytics, and it's working out quite well for a number of them. And then as you're building the strategy, remember that this is a shared culture of responsibility. When you're building systems of insight to leverage predictive analytics into your digital experiences, you shouldn't only be thinking about the digital experiences. You should be thinking about how is this going to affect the entire organization, and how can we create insights that could be leveraged into other parts of the company as well. And that about does it for me. So I think that we can move on to questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. I appreciate it. And we do have a few questions that have already been listed. So let me start with, we've got a repetitive one here quite a bit. Where can I get a copy of the recorded version or the slide deck? We will be sending out a link to all the attendees with to allow you to get to the recorded version of the presentation. So that will be sent out in the next few days. So let's get to some of the more substantive questions. One is a question of clarity, Rowan. What do you mean by shadow IT?
Yes, so this is a term that I think probably came about maybe 10, 15 years ago. And this is the idea of marketing and business organizations getting so fed up with the pace of their internal IT organizations that they go out and buy technology to meet the customer demands that they're facing without approval and without governance and without any kind of central organization. And while that does usually work as a Band-Aid solution, ultimately, it's counterproductive because you end up having many, many different products siloed in different areas of the companies. A lot of the times, if you're buying these point solutions that only do a particular, or sorry, that only do predictive analytics for a specific use, say lead generation or something like that, it's very hard to get that data out of those proprietary black box systems in a meaningful way that you can then leverage the insights into other parts of the company. So, so that's what I mean by shadow IT. This idea of spreading IT across the business as well as a centralized organization, which ends up getting hidden from many different parts of the company and makes creating a unified data and predictive analytics strategy quite challenging, or more challenging even.
Hey, Ron, can I ask you just to drop to the next slide, by the way, the one with the contact information? I think some people are interested in that as well.
There we go.
So, and I think one other issue that you see a lot, at least we see it in the Sisyphean world, is that when people buy these point solutions, they get up all over the place, but then people build on top of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you not only have the consolidation issue, but you have the integration and also the ability to, get everyone back what they already had when you do that consolidation. So that's one of the big challenges that we see when it comes to that, both in analytics and in our content management world as well. So let's keep on moving on. We've got, let's see, where do organizations start with predictive analytics? In marketing or customer support? And then we have a ... So I think they're looking for examples.
Yeah, so organizations start in all different sorts of places with predictive analytics, and it really depends on what data your company has, what technology your company has in place, and really what the investment in the concept of predictive analytics is. So we've seen a number of different organizations that have started in customer support and service with predictive analytics. So taking advantage of their existing CRM and customer service applications, putting some kind of predictive model in there to suggest next best actions or to suggest the next script to use can reap a lot of benefits for them. We're also seeing a number of different folks who go entirely to the other side, who are using predictive analytics in its very first iteration for things like predictive marketing or to do content serving on their websites. So it can really start in a number of different places, and it really depends on whether the initiative is coming from a centralized organization with a lot of support from the C-level or from some other powerful member of the organization, or whether it's starting within a particular line of business that is hoping to really evangelize the idea of predictive analytics across the organization. But no matter where you start, it's really important in your first few projects and implementations to focus on predictions that you know will create business value that you can quantify. So it's all well and good to talk about how we want to engage with customers more, and that actually does produce much more long-term value, but it's much harder to quantify that. So if you can start with a project that will give you a quantifiable outcome where you can show the advantage that you got by using predictive analytics, and you have the data available for you to do that within the organization as well, that's a great place to start.
Okay, great answer. There's just a few general questions. I think I can answer them on these, and then there's one I think that is better for you. Some people asking about, are there other webcasts coming up? Can I get a list of planned ones? Yeah, you can go to sitefinity.com, and you can see lists of when we have upcoming webcasts coming up. And also you can search, you can see for Rowan, I'm sure if you follow him on Twitter, you can also learn where he's going to be speaking again. So that'll be great. And also looking for a demonstration or practical use cases. And obviously there are a lot of different technologies out there that do predictive analytics. Sisyphean has the Digital Experience Cloud. There are other solutions out there, and so that's more of a vendor type question if you're going to try to find particular ones. I think Rowan gave some great examples of use cases during his presentation, so I'm not going to ask him to repeat those right now, but if you want to go to the recording when you get that link, you could probably check those out again, and I'm sure if you're looking for more, we can find them for you later. So here's an interesting question. As a developer myself, what would you recommend as the best approach to reskill or learn predictive analytics concepts and technologies? It's an interesting question.
Yep, so that's a great question, actually. So I would say probably the best way to start doing this is the way that I actually myself started to teach myself as an amateur developer to do predictive modeling. And this has been repeated in a number of companies that we've seen, basically just started playing around with the tools. So in several of the companies that I spoke to who have reskilled some of their developers, they started with basically just introducing them to the libraries within Python that are very useful for statistical analysis, and even scikit-learn, which is a machine learning library. Or R is a very easy to pick up, or not easy, relatively simple to pick up language for folks who are familiar with a number of other programming languages, and you can immediately get started there. In terms of organizationally, how you might want to reskill the developers, I think that hackathons are a great way to go about this. It not only does it sort of help you focus on business outcomes, so creating a contest to build an application that would have some kind of predictive model for a specific business outcome, but it also invigorates the developers who have the energy, who have the impetus and the motivation to learn this in the first place. So it's not likely that you're going to get developers who are just coming to work to make the paycheck, to write that line of code, being very interested in investing deeply in reskilling for predictive analytics. What you might see is what we call the intrinsically motivated developer focus on this more. So folks who are really interested in upping their career, improving their skills, and really making themselves a rock star developer are the best folks to target with this.
Okay. We have a number of questions in. Hopefully we'll get to all of them. From your experience, how long does the process take to see actionable results? Say the UK bank double-digit conversion. On average, from inception to tangible results, how long does it take? Weeks, months?
So there's no good number for this, because it is so variable depending upon the approach, depending upon the organization that you engage with, and depending upon what outcomes you're looking for. So for example, if you are simply looking to create a predictive model that would analyze your customer sales records to predict what would be your best-selling item at the next Black Friday, that would be something you could probably build in about a month or so if you have a data scientist on hand who has a good data set. And this is really important to all of this, is having data that is well cleaned and is not spotty and can actually be used with these algorithms. So we see a lot of folks struggle with actually getting the data into a usable form as the first challenge they face. So the extremes are, we've seen organizations that have taken 2 years, 3 years to implement predictive models within their organizations, but more recently we're seeing folks that are standing up from between 2 months to 4 or 5 months, so very, very quickly. And as you implement those first solutions, it becomes easier to implement the follow-ups, especially if you have an internal organization or you have a great outside partner who offers predictions as a service. And there are actually a number of different companies out there right now who offer what they call data science as a service.
All right, well, here's another one. This is could be a fairly technical question. What do you suggest for setup of a prediction loop? How we could know that loop had correct setup if variables are always changing?
So this is actually done in a number of the generalized predictive analytics tools that are available on the market. They have a pipeline that allows data to be fed back into the models as long as you point it the right sources. So you would have to point it at your streaming analytics engine, or you would have to point it at your CEP engine, or at your Storm or Spark implementation or something like that. But it can be automatically set to add new rows and new data to the predictive model and constantly rerun it. So this can actually happen within the software packages, as some of them exist today, or it can be done in a little bit more of a threaded together way across a number of different products. So basically what you would want to do is have your model and have a data set run through it that is appended with more data, or that is appended with new data coming into the organization. And a lot of these products also have some sort of alerting mechanism where you can basically set a threshold of effectiveness of a model. And once it drops below that threshold, it can queue an alert, either a report to a manager or an email, or some of them even do SMSs or HTML5 code to push out that alert, so you can intervene and either turn off the predictive model so that it doesn't give bad predictions, or so you can perhaps implement a new set of algorithms or a new model entirely to execute the predictions.
Okay. Now, Rowan, I know that you've got another speaking engagement at 3 o'clock, so I think we have time for about one more question, and then we're going to close this out. Can you start small with predictive analytics, or is it really just a big data thing?
So predictive analytics in general work better with more data. So when we're talking about big data here, I'm not referring to just the idea of having unstructured data available to your organization. I'm talking about having just lots of data. So many predictive models work much better with more data. However, there are some that, so simpler ones would work better with smaller data sets if you're just trying to predict off a few variables for a small target. And the thing is having a lot of data is great, but it doesn't necessarily add to the effectiveness of a prediction, because you can have data in your data set that is still part of the same row, so it's the same customer or the same machine or the same piece of inventory. And sometimes, even if you add feature after feature after feature after feature to that, it doesn't actually improve the prediction because it's not relevant to what you're trying to predict. So it's really much more important to focus on getting clean and structured for the analytic, not necessarily structured in the traditional sense, data to your predictive programs or to your data scientists so that they can do the work effectively. So size is important, but quality is really even more important here.
Great. Well, thank you, Rowan. I'd like to thank you very much, Rowan, for not only the content you presented, but also your thoughtful responses to the questions of our audience. I'd like to thank our audience for joining us today. There will be more webcasts coming your way. Look in your email box. You should see some invitations coming in the coming months. With that said, I'd like to thank Rowan Curran from Forrester Research. Thank all of you, and hope you all have a fantastic day. Take care.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks, everyone.